Hello and welcome to Tuesday's episode of Crypto. My God, things are fairly chill today, but there is some good news. I'm just gonna hop right into it. Bang! So in the crypto industry, there's really two parallel worlds going on right now. The on-chain world, the truly crypto original, the authentic, the nativity of the space, and the off-chain TradFi adoption, which is happening at lightning speed and is arguably some of the longer news after we've pursued acceptance for so many years. Now, the interesting thing is that while the adoption is happening on the traditional finance side, the on-chain stuff is lagging. So we're seeing this boom in stocks while we're seeing a lag in the altcoins, and maybe that will repair itself. I do think this really comes down to the Fed easing. But we got some news today from that the SEC is in the early stages of creating a generic listing standard for token-based ETFs in coordination with exchanges. Pretty fascinating, and we are clearly going to see a boon of ETFs. Now, is this really good? I don't know for sure. The pro thesis of the ETFs is that it allows people like institutional investors to get in and enter into crypto assets, really larger assets like the major L1 gas assets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, etc. And there's been a lot of restrictions like staking, for example. Now, that's a pretty negative position to take because if you're not staking an asset that's inflationary, you're literally just being inflated away and you're losing out on capital. So that's a bit silly. All of this is to say that we are going to see more ETFs, and at some point, will there just be too many for them to matter? Is there really going to be, traditional finance appetite for some of these assets? I don't know. It will be very interesting to see the Pengu and the Pudgy Penguin NFTs go inside of an ETF. You're looking at a meme coin, albeit one that has a very strong following, as well as an NFT collection. Will that impact the NFTs? I mean, will that pump their price? I truly don't know. So the buying appetite for these ETFs is very much remains to be seen. We see tons of inflow into Bitcoin, into Ethereum, into Solana, but does it really expand beyond that? Hard to tell. Of course, as I mentioned, with staking, we are seeing the first staking ETFs start to launch. I do think this is fundamentally healthy. If you're going to hold these assets and you don't stake them, that is dubious. They are meant to be staked. The economics is rewarding people that are staking and injuring those that aren't. So to create an ETF and get people to buy into something only to have them inflated away is very counterintuitive. Now, this approval does mean we're probably going to see staking inside these ETFs, and that's very healthy for that part of the world, but does it really change the buy-side appetite for a larger asset base? And I mean anything beyond these L1 gas assets. However, this goes live tomorrow, Wednesday, July 2nd, so, good for us. If we're going to sell these tokens to people, we may as well be selling them in the best version possible. Of course, we also have the Grayscale conversion, and this is pretty important just because Grayscale's been kind of trading on this premium, and it was the Grayscale carry trade that very much led to the collapse of Three Arrows Capital and Terra Luna. And that was the fact that Grayscale, not being a publicly traded ETF, was allowed to charge a heavy premium for access to these assets. They were basically arbitraging the opportunity that there was no regulation around it, that it was very difficult for traditional finance. But again, with the ETFs exploding, Grayscale's business model is at risk. So converting the Grayscale Digital Large Cap Trust into an ETF should be kind of fascinating. It's also a basket, so maybe this is going to be a better exposure vehicle than picking and choosing your individual asset ETFs. I don't know. Now, on to some fun news and just things I'm following from like my heart and from my passion is one of the presentations at ETHCCC, which is going on right now in Cannes, France. 0x Zach is one of the developers that I've enjoyed because he really builds things that he sees just as necessary. They launched Canto Network, which was very much an experiment on economics. It didn't provide technological bents, but they built everything like the Uniswaps, like the AMMs, like the stable coins directly into the protocol itself. It pumped and ultimately dumped, and I don't think that is their fault necessarily, but it was a cool experimentation. He is a core contributor to a lot of interesting protocols and a developer behind Slingshot. It's a token swap platform, but he came out and basically gave this very saucy presentation, and sauciness is what this industry could use, saying from his point of view that the Ethereum Foundation is not actually interested in supporting the price accrual of Ethereum, that they're not being aggressive enough in going after things that will help Ethereum itself win, that they're a little overly passive and that they're just taking what is classically known as the communist perspective on Ethereum. So Zach came out and he announced his own version of the EF, the Ethereum Foundation, of the Ethereum Community Foundation, with its goal, obviously, of making ETH go to 10K. And of course, as we zoom in here, the ticker is ETH, the number go up. The P word price, funding projects that drive price appreciation, institutional grade asset, drive maximum value of ETH to ETH stakeholders. So that's a really fun one, and it's kind of pissing off a lot of the academia inside of Ethereum, but hell, this kind of stuff is always useful. These buttons are meant to be pushed, and it is healthy in an open ecosystem to have a variety of viewpoints. So hell yeah to 0x Zach, and this is Amin Soleimani, who is just another sort of spicy contributor to the Ethereum community, worth a follow. Now, one thing I am excited for is the launch of Rujira. I've talked about Thorchain in the past. Thorchain went ahead and bought the majority of assets on a protocol called Kujira, a very robust DeFi protocol. And they said, hey, we want you to start building all of your applications on top of the Thorchain protocol. So the Thorchain protocol is now going to become boring. It's just going to be swapping L1 assets to L1 assets. Think native Bitcoin swaps to native Ethereum swaps. The controversy around Thorchain is it is entirely permissionless. Anyone can swap without any form of KYC. There is nothing to stop an asset swap. So as a result, we've seen exploited assets from the DPRK go through Thorchain, but they've also gone through a variety of other products. There's, the Tornado Cash Mixer, for example. And at the end of the day, there's been a very big argument inside of crypto. Do you censor transactions that are maybe illicit, that come from like exploited funds? And their attitude is no. Permissionless is a fundamental truth. There is no way to maintain a permissionless protocol if there are ways to enforce permission. So anyway, Thorchain had a very big blow up. I covered it when they added leverage loans betting inside of the protocol itself. They've now removed everything. They're keeping it as boring as possible, and they've launched Rujira on top of it to get a little bit more experimental, a little funky without throwing off the underlying protocol. And what's really fun about this is that we are going to get all of this perpetual trading, all of the things that we get from Hyperliquid, and, realistically, they can ping an oracle from Coinbase around these tokenized stocks, and they can begin to list tokenized stocks. Now, are you going to own that stock? Of course not. It's just a metadata reflection, right? They're pinging the price, and you can day trade on the price. We're just trading bits of data. But what is fun about this is that you can enter with Bitcoin, you can enter with Ethereum, you can enter with Solana. If you have a native asset and a wallet, there is nothing to stop you from accessing this global DeFi market, this neo banking, if you will. So this is going live. They're slowly ramping it up. I believe you can only trade in a very limited capacity right now, but it is cool to see that there is still a team that is fully committed to the cypherpunk ethos, that anybody can gain access to this. This is unstoppable. It is decentralized, and it's never going to have KYC, so that's kind of cool. That being said, it's a project that's totally worth paying attention to. I'm always fascinated by people that sort of buck the system. There's definitely a lot of buttons being pushed here by allowing KYC-less, permissionless trading. So, best of luck to them. It's certainly something that anonymity supports the development structure, because there's no doubt that the powers that be will be going after them. I know they've looked at Thorchain extensively, but it is exciting because this is why I got into crypto. You just wanted to be able to have wealth and to move it around and to exchange it and to utilize it and to invest it without having an overlord on top of you. That is the core of why I got into this industry, and I find it exciting, and I'm so glad that there's people willing to take the risk to go on and do this. Of course, Roman Storm from Tornado Cash, he is going up against the New York Southern District. They pulled a lot of aggressive cards. They're not allowing any expert witnesses. They're basically stacked the deck against Roman. So he's currently raising capital right now to go fight that fight and keep himself out of jail for being a contributor to an autonomous protocol. This is really the First Amendment. It's freedom of speech. If you can't write down code, which is just math, and deploy it to the internet, then where does it stop, right? If Roman gets thrown in jail, what can we not say out loud that could be executed by a computer, especially as we transition into a world where words can be translated into code through AI? So this is all very important, and it's nice to see that it's out there, that people are vying for this level of freedom and self-sovereignty and privacy. Privacy is not a crime. So light news day, but still fairly exciting stuff happening. And as always, good luck, stay safe out there. I may be taking a break this week. I've just got a lot of family issues I got to deal with. I will try to keep up to date. If there's anything truly fascinating, be confident that I will come out and I will speak to you. But in the interim, as always, have a great day, and I will see you later.